Over the Garden Wall is a short, 10-episode series created by Patrick McHale for Cartoon Network. The show's original release was November 3rd through November 7th, 2014. The show is about two young half-brothers, Wirt, an easily scared, poetic 17-year-old who always assumes that things are going to go bad, and Greg, a happy-go-lucky 6-year-old who doesn't fully understand the situations they find themselves in during the show. The story is about Wirt and Greg getting lost in the woods on Halloween night. Trying to find their way back, they meet very interesting characters, such as the woodsman, who is very suspicious and who Wirt doesn't trust much at all. They also meet a talking bird named Beatrice, when Greg helps her out of a bush that she's stuck in. As a thank you for getting her out of the bush, she says she'll help them get to a woman named Adelaide, who Beatrice says will help them get home. The show from then on is about them trying to get to Adelaide's place, and things ensue. Over the Garden Wall wasn't as popular as I think it probably should have been, and has slowly become sort of a cult classic, with the largest audience being teens and young adults, which might seem a little older than you might think, considering the art style is very cartoony, but there are a lot of heavy topics and scary topics within the show. A lot of the teens relate to Wirt, who starts off very scared and somewhat of a pushover, but he slowly starts to grow and become more confident in himself. Many people who watched it at first kind of just saw it as a Halloween show with not much depth. To that, I highly disagree. Over the Garden Wall was and is so much more than people think it is on the surface. As the show goes on and you pay more attention, you might realize that there's a very dark and kind of sad underline to the show. People can always take what they want from the show and draw their own conclusions of what the show is really about, but I think the show's about accepting death. There's a lot in the show that supports this idea. In the 9th episode, my favorite episode, we get to see a flashback of how the boys even ended up lost in the woods. It shows them getting in trouble with a police officer in a cemetery. So they run to a wall and jump over it to get away from the officer. And throughout the show, there's this soft vignette around the edges of the screen that slowly get more and more noticeable as the show progresses, giving the show a dreamy type of look. And as the show goes on, they meet people who aren't from their time period, such as one of my favorite characters named Quincy Endicott. In the 9th episode, we see his gravestone that the boys are hiding behind, showing that he might be in some sort of limbo between life and death. Finally, the last episode, at the very end, we see that Wirt and Greg were in a frozen lake the entire time, showing that everything that had been shown to us was some sort of dream or limbo of sorts. They get pulled out of the lake and taken to the hospital, and over the scenes, a song called Old Black Train plays. And throughout the song, there are lyrics that prove even more that they might have been dying throughout the entire show.
There's an old black train a-comin', scraping along the iron. You don't need no ticket, boys, it'll take you when it's time.
If you didn't catch any of the lyrics, it's about a train that takes you through kind of a limbo to the afterlife. One of my favorite lines being, "The train will stop a minute, but don't let it leave you here," meaning that they don't want to be stuck in between this limbo of life and death like the other characters are in. In conclusion, there were many things going on during November 2014, that time period, that could have caused the making of this show, particularly a lot of death. I think that this show was a very good way to make people who looked more in depth about what the show actually meant feel a lot better about life and death, and I think it even works now in these crazy times where COVID's happening and stuff like that. Watching something like this show that's goofy on the surface, that has an underlying message, can make someone like me feel a little bit better.
Can't you see I'm lonely, lonely